Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm delighted to speak to the second reading of the Local Government Auckland Reform Bill. I'd like to acknowledge the huge amount of work done by Honourable Rodney Hyde and the Honourable John Carter. This is the final bill of three that will complete the governance arrangements in the Auckland region, which will bring enduring unity and progress for Auckland for the next 50 to 100 years. The previous speaker believes that the sky will fall in and there will be no progress, and Auckland will ground to a halt. Well, I doubt that very much. The proof will be in the pudding, and I'm quite confident that Auckland will progress with this bill. The bill provides that this is the main purpose is to resolve matters relating to the reorganisation of local government in Auckland begun under the Local Government Tamaki Makaurau Reorganisation Act 2009 and continued under the Local Government Auckland Council Act 2009. I think it's useful at this point in time to recap to the House why this legislation is here exactly. For some time it's been recognised that Auckland has not been progressing and the existing governance arrangements weren't working, and that's why the previous government established the Royal Commission, which was supported by political parties in the House at that time. The Royal Commission, after 18 months of consultation, some 3,500 submissions, 500 oral submissions and advice from experts, uncovered problems such as suffocating red tape, transport bottlenecks and development and lost opportunities. Mr Speaker, the Commission said doing nothing was not an option. The Commission found many other things holding up Auckland and they relate to the way the city was run. In particular, they felt that there was a lack of leadership, no single vision for Auckland, and important Auckland-wide matters were getting tangled up with competing interests of local councils. Mr Speaker, that is why this government acted swiftly. Doing nothing was simply not an option. I've had the privilege of being a member on the Select Committee, and we heard from Aucklanders from all walks of life. We heard their passion, we heard their fears. Importantly, Mr Speaker, we listened. 800 submissions were received from local authorities, community boards, individuals and organisations. Many expressed deep concern with the aspects of this bill. They told us they did not want to lose their local community, which they identified with and they belonged to. They were concerned that their community would get swallowed up. They were concerned they would simply lose their identity. Aucklanders told the committee they did not want Wellington to be in charge of their city. They wanted Aucklanders to be in charge of their city. They were passionate and they were vocal. The Select Committee heard their concerns and the changes were made to this bill to reflect those concerns. I'd like to focus on local boards. Mr Speaker, the local boards will be the face of local government. They will have an incredibly important role to play. The local boards will be locally elected people who understand their community's concerns and hopes. Local boards will be required to meet regularly with their communities they represent. They will be required to formally consult their communities when developing their local board plans. Local boards will have a wide-ranging role. They will make decisions on local matters, provide local leadership and, importantly, strengthen and build the local community. The local boards will also provide important local input into region-wide strategies and plans, including those of the council-controlled organisations. The second bill provided for local boards being responsible for all non-regulatory activities unless a regional approach would be better promote the well-being of Aucklanders. The legislation also specifically requires local boards to prepare a 3-yearly local board plan in consultation with their communities and to agree annually with the governing local body priorities and funding. Mr Speaker, local boards will play an integral role in Auckland Council's overall planning process. Before the local government election in October, the Auckland Transition Agency will publish the local board's baseline lists of responsibilities and functions as well as their baseline funding. Any minor changes will be negotiated and agreed between the elected Auckland Council and the local boards at the time of developing the 2012 Long-Term Council Community Plan. Local boards will also propose bylaws and are expected to undertake a range of regulatory functions delegated by the governing body. It is important to ensure that the funding to the community is maintained through the transition to the Auckland Council. Before the election, the Auckland Transition Agency will publish a planning document. It will set the first local board budgets. Community funding will be allocated between the governing body and the local boards, depending on whether the objectives of the funding are region-wide or local. These allocations will be based on current allocations of contestable community funding made by Auckland's councils and community boards. When the Auckland Council determines its new funding policy and long-term community plan in 2012, it will make future decisions about community funding. Local boards will agree future community funding available for their communities in their local board agreements. Mr Speaker, the new Super City will consist of the Auckland Council of 20 councillors and a mayor and 21 local boards. The Mayor and the 20 councillors will focus on the big picture and make decisions that affect the Auckland region regionally. The local boards will represent communities at the local level. Their roles and functions have not been defined in the legislation. Instead, the government has inserted in law the principle that decisions are best made at the local level unless there is good reason not to. The initial roles and functions of the local boards will be set out by the Auckland Transition Authority. The new Auckland Council will be able to review the local board's responsibilities after it comes into being on November the 1st. The Select Committee concluded that a prescriptive approach would be far too difficult, too complex and very restrictive. Rather, the committee considered that a principle-based approach would allow for flexibility and provide for the ability to adapt to changing local preferences and demographics. I am confident, after reading the Auckland Transition Agency discussion document on local boards, that the initial roles and functions of the local boards that will be set out by the Auckland Transition Authority before the local body of election will be wise and appropriate. The discussion document showed that the ATA had an excellent understanding on the role of local boards and the importance they were to the community. Importantly, the new Auckland Council will be able to review the local board responsibilities after it comes to being on November 1 and has the ability to add new functions and devolve more responsibility if it so chooses. Mr Speaker, the Select Committee inserted a new clause 87A to provide for the initial allocation of non-regulatory decision-making responsibilities to local boards to be fixed until the Auckland Council adopts its long-term council community plan for the period beginning 1 July 2012. The committee felt that this would give the local board members and the communities they represent more certainty about their roles and functions. Importantly, Mr Speaker, the proposed amendment does not prevent the governing body from giving local boards additional functions or making delegations, but would prevent the governing body from eroding or taking away any non-regulatory functions that had been allocated to the boards by the Transition Authority. Mr Speaker, the commentary of the bill provides examples of what the local board non-regular activities might be. The examples provided are vast and wide-ranging, and they emphasise that the detail required to legislate would be simply prohibitive. Mr Speaker, the committee is confident that a principles-based approach is the way forward and the best way to allocate functions as appropriately, and I'm sure time will prove that is the case exactly. Local boards will need to be flexible and respond to their community's needs. Being prescriptive and defining legislation would have the potentially opposite outcome, and that would be an unintended consequence. Mr Speaker, I'd like to again congratulate the Minister of Local Government and the Associate Minister of Local Government for their leadership and hard work. The final bill has been acclaimed by various Herald reports, and I know as time goes on and the public understand the changes we have made, they also will be accepting. I commend this bill to the House.
Mr Speaker. Sir William CO. Au te whatalofa atu I lau whionga whonga whetalai